Hi, this is Mrs. Roberts, and today we are going to be going over AP Psychology 9.3. The main person to study for today is Jean Piaget. He was a Swiss psychologist that studied children. He was a developmental psychologist, and I'd like to share with you and just remind you of a graphic organizer. You can find one similar to this in both your textbook and your study book about his theory of the 4 stages of cognitive development. It's not difficult to see the progression in these images. He narrowed it down to 4 stages. That's easy for your brain to remember. What's not so easy is the titles that he used: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational. In order to help you remember those, we're going to need some sort of memory aid. So what I'm going to propose to you is to help you remember using an acronym that you probably know sort of well from the Sarah McLachlan song and the commercials. You know, the American ASPCA, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Similar type of scenario. So we've got SPC and then an F. So if we can remember SPCF instead of SPCA, not too difficult. Even if you just remembered these 3, it would be easy to put this in the last place. So another way we could think of it is Swiss, Piaget, children found. Whichever way you like to help yourself remember the order that these go in. Sometimes you'll be asked to just come up with, okay, a child is 8. Which stage is he in? So you'll need to know, which order these are. So you're going to be able to remember these pictures and sort of remember what they're doing at each stage. So in that sensory motor, they're just trying to coordinate their senses with their physical actions. They're reflexive, but eventually are able to use symbolic thought. In that next stage, pre-operational, so they're building up to this, they are able to go beyond the idea that, there's an object, it exists, we know what this symbolizes. They can use words, they can use visuals to represent what all of that means. Then we eventually go to that concrete operational stage. The main difference here, as discussed in your book, and we'll discuss this in just a minute, is the ability to understand conservation. And so that's what you see here. This kid is trying to, analyze or put together like materials, and you could maybe even see him pouring one thing into another, like some liquid from one place to the next, and notice that those are the similar amounts of liquid, regardless of what is holding the liquid. And then that formal operational stage is that abstract, idealistic, logical ways. It's what you're living right now, that formal operational stage. All right, so let's get back to the quiz. Question 1. Antonia has a cat. The first time she sees a rabbit, she calls it a cat. Her mistake is due to the process of. All right, the right answer here is assimilation. In your notes, I asked you to learn about assimilation, schemas, and accommodation. A nice visual to help you understand what those are, just to remind you. So schemas are the kind of like generic category, and understanding that you're learning what is something, like what does it mean to be, in this case, in this example, it's a cow. So 2-year-old Gabriella has learned the schema for cow. So it's just a generic, like, what is it? What exists in this category? In assimilation, she sees something that looks similar to it, and she can't, she thinks it's a cow because it kind of fits in with her schema of what a cow looks like. So she's still learning, but over time, she is able to accommodate the idea that other brown furry things can be other items besides a cow. So she sort of expands. So it says Gabriella accommodates her schema for large shaggy animals and continues to modify that schema to include mommy moose, baby moose, and so forth. And if any of you guys have younger siblings, you've seen this happen. So that's why it is not going to be accommodation. And then you've also got terms from prior units about discrimination and generalization. She sees a rabbit, she calls it a cat. It's not going to be a generalization or discrimination unless I put more information in here. She has a gray cat. She sees a gray rabbit. She calls it a cat. That might be something where she couldn't discriminate or she overgeneralized. All right, number 2. In which stage of development do infants learn object permanence? All right, the correct answer for this, object permanence, meaning you take something away and then you still know that it's there. That's the very first stage. It's the sensory motor stage. So back to our visual. So our sensory motor visual. So that's this stage. So if you take something away, they do not know that it doesn't exist anymore. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to question number 3. All right, 4-year-old Kate positions herself squarely in front of all the other kids to watch a magician. Piaget would attribute this to Kate's, and this one is going to be egocentrism. So what is she unable to do? So egocentrism, according to Piaget, is not what you would think of like a Kanye West egocentrism. What he did was he used a problem, a 3 mountains problem. So what he did was he had a boy sit and showed him 3 mountains. You can see they're different order. In this case, this one looks like pretty flat. So then he said, okay, I want you to imagine that you're this man. So he would be sitting here. I want you to imagine you're me. What do I see? And oftentimes children in this stage, they were not able to see what this person could see. So whenever we say, again, back to 4-year-old, we're trying to remember which time period is that? What can kids do? What can they not do? And so then we go back to our right here, pre-operational stage, so 2 to 7 years old. So you can definitely think in symbols, but it's difficult for you to see the world outside of yourself. All right. Moving on to number 4. Daniel is learning that 5 pennies spread out on his desk are the same number of coins as 5 pennies in a pile. According to Piaget, how old is Daniel likely to be? Okay, if he's learning about this, so he's learning about it. So if someone thinks he's ready to know that 5 pennies spread on his desk is the same as 5 pennies upward, what Piaget found is that the period that works the best in is that 3rd period, right? So back to this, our 3rd period, concrete operational stage. So how old would you be? Somewhere between 7 and 11. So we go back to here, we see that it's between 7 and 11, the only answer choice is 8 years old. In fact, Piaget had multiple different types of conservation tasks. You can see those on the screen now. This is sort of similar to what you would see. So he would show them this first. This is the original presentation. And then he would then spread them out and say, is there the same amount? Which one is bigger? Which one has more pennies? And if you were kind of concrete observational stage, you would say this would be the larger, right? So since Daniel is 8, he is able to discriminate between these two things. All right. Another kind of example you might see is like these 2 images, and then whenever they show them one that's sort of spread out, is there the same number of squares or grass? It says same amount of grass to eat. So there's lots of examples like this. All right. Number 5, the ability to generate several alternate hypotheses in order to explain a phenomenon demonstrates cognition in which of the following Piagetian stages. So this one again is going to be, or not again, but next will be formal operational. So back to here. So let's go back to our original. This is our last stage. You're 11 years and up. You can be abstract, idealistic, and logical. So we go back to here. So again, alternate hypotheses. So you can do multiple different types of thinking. You can think of multiple different types of answers. You can be divergent in your thinking. All right, last, number 6. 2 children are in the same stage of cognitive development and both can't solve problems involving conservation of number. That was kind of the example that was up here. However, when one of the children is given assistance, she is able to correctly solve such problems. When the other child receives the same help, he is still unable to solve them. This example best demonstrates. All right, so in your homework, you learned about the concept of the proximal zone of development. That's here. So to give you an example of what that means, here's our visualizing the zone of proximal development aid. So the idea of what you can learn, it's a little higher. So these are things you can do all on your own. Yes, oh yes. If you're listening, there is definitely an announcement. We are still here at Dunbar. It is a problem. All right, so things